In this video, I'd like to show you how to sample sounds from scratch from an external source and how to manipulate them in Maschine. So I'm going to be sampling something from vinyl. I've got the output of my mixer connected to two of the inputs on my audio interface. Let's just take a look first of all in the Maschine audio and MIDI settings. So File, Audio and MIDI settings. I need to ensure first of all that I've selected my audio interface device from this drop down menu. So my Motu 828 has got loads of different available inputs and outputs that we can use for splitting up the output of Maschine down either a hardware mixing desk, or if you're using it inside something like Logic or Ableton Live, we can split the output of Maschine down different channels in Ableton Live or Logic. And input wise, just go over to routing. I'm just going to select inputs. You can see that Maschine can have up to 8 mono inputs or 4 stereo inputs. And by default, these will be the first 8 available inputs on your audio interface. You can change these around if you want. So for example, if you want Maschine input number 1 to actually be analog input number 4, you can do something like that. Now, it just so happens that I plugged my DJ mixer into analog 3 and analog 4 on the Motu audio interface. So this will correlate to Maschine input 3 left and Maschine input 3 right. So completely up to you where you're going to plug in your sound source using any one of your available audio interface inputs. It's completely up to you. It just so happens that I've chosen analog 3 and analog 4, which marries up with Maschine input 3 left and Maschine input 3 right in this case. I'm just going to click on OK. So I want to select the sound slot and group where I'm going to record my sample to. So again, doesn't matter, we can pick any particular group. For argument's sake, let's just pick group C. Just leave it as sound slot number 1. I'm going to hit sampling. So straight away we're presented with the options relevant to how we're going to set about recording audio from an external source. The record button, or the record options, are enabled, button 1. Source external by default, or we can resample internally by selecting intern from just turning rotary control number 1. So I'm going to leave it as external. Next, rotary control allows you to choose where Maschine will be taking its input from. So at the moment it says input 1 left. So that would be a mono input. If I just turn it round, it now says input 1 right, and that would also be a mono input. If I turn it round once more, it would say input 1 left and right together, and that would be a stereo input. So remember I said that I plugged my DJ mixer into the inputs on my audio interface that correlate with input 3. I'm just going to turn this rotary. So it says input 3 left and right, because I'd like to take a stereo recording. Now let me just start the record playing, and what we should hopefully see is when the record starts playing, Maschine, if we've selected the correct input, will register some level here. And there you go, you can see that Maschine's registering some level there. So there's a couple of different ways that we can set about starting the recording. The first way is the way that I'm in fact going to choose in this case, which is a mode called detect mode. Now what detect mode allows you to do is, using rotary control number 4, is to set a threshold. So you notice that when I started the record playing there was a bit of low level noise, a little bit of needle noise, which it was actually below the threshold that I've set for recording. But as soon as the drum kicked in, as soon as the drums kicked in, the level was a lot louder and would have been enough to start recording because it would have crossed the threshold. The level would have crossed the threshold. So we can set the threshold just above where this needle noise is happening, but low enough so that as soon as the drums start, boom, it crosses the threshold and we'll begin recording this sample. The other mode that we can use is arguably more relevant when we're resampling internally. It's called sync, and we can choose to record for a number of bars, or in fact we can just set that recording what's called length free, which means we can stop recording at any time. But we can set a quantized number of bars. So a machine could be playing along in the background. You could have something playing already that you want to resample. And then with sync mode, you will be able to record a perfect 1, 2, 4 bar sample and so on and so forth. But because I'm sampling externally, I think that detect mode is going to be better in this case. So we're about ready to start recording. What I need to do now is hit start. The machine now informs me that it's waiting for the input, the incoming level, to cross the threshold. I've just started the record playing. It's not recording just yet. As soon as the drums kick in, the level's loud enough to begin recording. So I'm just going to record a couple of bars of this. Just hit stop. So you can see we've actually managed to omit that needle crackle from the beginning of the sample, and we're just left with a couple of bars worth of drums. So now we need to go about processing these drums so that we can manipulate them in machine. The first thing I'm going to do is hit edit, and using buttons 5 and 7, I'm going to select, I'm going to scroll through the menu options until I get to this option, which is called norm or normalize. So you can see the level that I've recorded is quite low at the moment. So I could actually maybe try re-recording that whilst turning the gain on my DJ mixer up a little bit to give me a bit more of a larger recording level. In this case, I'm going to cheat a little bit and I'm going to press this button, norm, which is short for normalize. What that'll do is find the loudest point of the recording signal and just raise that to 0 dB, and everything else will be raised accordingly. So in short, it makes it as loud as it can be without distorting. So you can see now that I can trigger that recording using the sound slot pad. Now what I'm going to do is just take that sound slot and the sample that's recorded onto it. I'm just going to hit duplicate. I'm just going to copy it across into a few sound slots because there's a few different things that I'd like to do with this sample. The first thing I like to do is just take 1 bar's worth of drums. 2, 3, 4. Just going to take the first bar worth of drums, chop that up, and put each separate drum hit onto a different pad so that I've captured the sounds and then I can play in my own pattern using those sounds. To do this, need to find the option that says truncate. Now we can do all of this using the machine LCD screens. You can do it using the mouse on the computer interface as well, on the software interface. We're just going to do it using the machine controls, the hardware controls. So rotary control 1 and 2, decide which part of the sample we want to keep and which we're going to get rid of when we use the truncate function. You can see I'm just turning rotary control number 2, and everything to the right of that N marker is being greyed out, and that means That's the bit we're going to be getting rid of. Just going to go a little bit further. Now, if I need to be more accurate, nearly there, just need to be more accurate, then I can use rotary control 5 for zooming. And it zooms right in on the end marker, and then rotary 6 I can use to scroll left and right through the sample, so I can be a bit more accurate with my selection now. That's pretty much spot on. So I'm going to hit truncate now. And now I'm just left with that 1 bar's worth of drums. Now what I've done is just gone on to page 2 of these edit controls. I've enabled the loop, and you notice you get a control to decide which bit of the sample you're going to be looping. I'm just going to set those around the whole sample. And that just allows me to hear whether I have cut the right length. I just hold my finger down on the pad and it keeps looping and it sounds right. Which that does. Then we know that we've chopped the right number of drums out there to equal 1 bar. So now what we can do is, rather than just having to trigger that, we can slice it up so that each of those drums appears on a separate pad. So I'm going to select slice, and again, as with most things in Machine, there's a number of different options. Depending on what you're slicing up, some will work better than others. So at the moment, what's happened is we're on split mode for the slice. And this doesn't take into account the musical length of the sample. It just basically splits it into this number of slices, which we can dictate using rotary control number 2. So it's not particularly musical, like I say. It's very much, there's a sample, chop it into 16. The next option is grid. Now this does take into account the musical length. So we can split the sample into 16ths, 8ths, quarters of a bar. But the mode that I'm going to use is something called detect. Now using this mode, you can detect the transients or the peaks in the audio signal that we've recorded and place each different drum transient or drum hit on a separate pad. Now rotary control 2 in this case sets what's called the sensitivity. This is where you can choose how sensitive the automatic transient detection is. If you set it too high, you get far too many slices, too low, and you don't get enough. Somewhere in the middle, and it's about there. Although that last slice you can hear, rather than just being one sound, one transient, there's actually 2 drum sounds on there. So what we can do is use detect mode. Using the sensitivity rotary, we can get it almost there. And then if we do need to do any fine tweaks, when we're in slice mode, I'm going to hit edit. Just use the pad to select the slice that you'd like to edit. And we can add an extra slice in there. We can zoom right in, scroll, And using these two controls, slice start and slice end, we can set the exact point there at which we'd like that slice to begin. And there we go, we've split that onto two different pads now. So there we go, all of those sounds on a separate pad for each sound. Come out of edit mode, and we've got two different options, apply and apply to. Now apply, if we just press that button, we'll slice that audio sample up for you according to the settings that we've made. But notice it's only the first slice that we trigger when we're looking at all 16 sound slots. If I go into keyboard pad mode though, make sure that slot's selected, hold shift, press pad mode. We've got each of the different slices on a differently pitched MIDI note. We just scroll to the bottom of the piano roll, you can see we also get the MIDI pattern which will trigger that sample. As it was intended to be played back by the artist, but what we can do now, because we've sliced it up, is speed it up and slow it down. The other thing that we can do with that, we just select a different pattern. Is write a brand new pattern using those drum sounds.